Hi, welcome back to Roadmap, the Auto Trader podcast for all things product and tech. This episode we're looking at apps, personalisation and a bit of privacy. We've got three guests who spend their days in this area. Today I've got with me Harriet. Hi Harriet.
Hey.
I've got Paul. Hey Paul.
Hey, morning.
And I've got Sam.
Hi.
Hey. Right, just to kick off, I'd like you to introduce because you've got three very different roles. So I'm going to start with you, Sam, and what is your role at Auto Trader?
So I am a senior test engineer on native apps.
Cool. Yourself, Harriet?
I'm a senior developer. Well, I work in the Android team specifically.
All right,
So,
Android,
yeah.
not Apple.
No, I'm not going to start that war on camera, but no, never Apple.
Okay, and what about yourself, Paul?
So I'm senior mobile marketing manager. Get to take all the great stuff that these guys and the rest of the team put together and take it to market to drive some downloads and get people to come back. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Senior. Three
Exactly.
seniors, brilliant. Okay, so we're going to kick off around thinking about Auto Trader, the journey, and the whole consumer experience and the different platforms we have out there, because a lot of people might just think of us as the website. So just thinking about the consumer experience and how important that is to Auto Trader.
Yeah, and I think maybe if I kick off, I think first and foremost, it's incredibly exciting time for us, with the app. The last 3-4 years, it's been the fastest growing platform. Get around 3 million monthly active users. So there's a lot of people kind of passing through the
Wow.
app. I think what's really interesting for me is kind of sharing those success stories, particularly with people like yourselves and other members of the leadership team and around the business, because the app now is driving kind of half of the number of leads that we see in the business. More ad views are generated through the app as well. So I think over the last few years we've really developed that user experience to kind of just drive more engagement from the user. And I think this is obviously where we're going to come on and talk a little bit about how we're tailoring that experience for them. But I think first and foremost, it's just a really kind of powerful tool, and I think really driving that business forward, which is really good for us.
Cool. And of yourself, Harriet, Sam, have you always worked in apps, or is this a new foray for yourselves?
So I didn't originally come from like an app background. I did electronic engineering at university with like music tech, so a bit different. And then after I graduated, I did wearable tech for a bit. And I got made redundant literally after 2 weeks because I was like the last one in. I was the first one out.
Oh, bummer.
So I had a bit of a mass panic, and my friend got me a job at a lighting company that needed an app to be made for their lighting products. So that's how I ended up doing it. I actually really liked it.
Yeah.
So this is like the third app that I've worked on.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what about yourself, Sam?
Yeah, I actually started in the graduate scheme back in 2018 as a tester. So I've been a tester for the whole career, but I actually started on web. So I did about a year and a half on web, I think. I moved to apps just before the COVID lockdown, so it's approaching about 3.5 years on apps now, and a year and a half on web before that.
Yeah, it's funny, we do refer to the COVID years now. Like, it's just a blur, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah, I remember it very well because the week that we all went fully remote was the week before I moved to apps, so it was quite the experience.
And Paul, have you always worked in like mobile apps?
No,
space,
so you can probably tell from the grey. I'm a little kind of older than these two youngsters, but no, I actually started in consumer electronics, so kind of hi-fis and home cinema.
No way.
Always kind of really fascinated with kind of technology and kind of products. So, it was about 7 or 8 years ago. Kind of had the opportunity to kind of step in and lead a mobile app development at a photo printing company.
Right.
Just really fast-paced. Just really enjoyed it. And just really gone from there, So it's just constantly changing, new things launching, and it's been exciting.
Cool. Just to give like people tuning in that might be from outside AT, just give us a bit of an insight of how the apps world works and interacts with the rest of the business, because obviously it is a slightly different skill set, but obviously we work in a more wider P&T perspective.
Yeah, I'd say. So I've been here, it's coming up to 5 years now, it does not feel that long, but it's definitely changed a lot since I first started working here. So I don't know if anyone remembers, sat down here, but the apps team used to be quite small.
Yeah.
And the apps team's grown massively. We're over 20 people now. I think when I joined at one point, there was only 5 of us. We had one iOS developer. Yeah. That was Adam, bless him. But he's done well. The app's still going. But I think when I first started, not many people really knew who the apps team were and what we did. I don't think people use the apps as much. I think people sort of used to see the app as a search form pretty much. They didn't realise the potential that the apps had. and how many users that we have. And I think since people have started realising more and started, looking at the numbers, seeing how many users we have, since they've sort of locked into how we can personalise the app, we've had a lot more communication across the company. We work a lot closer with designers now, whereas before we were just getting designs from web to use on the app, whereas now I think people are a bit more considerate about sort of the app experience and like what our users might want to see, because we're an app first. We can do a lot of things on the app that you wouldn't be able to do on the web. And now we're getting to a point, so we've created, it's called NAS, which is Native App Service. No, sorry, I'm going to say that again.
So hi.
It's called NAS, which is Native App Service, and we love an acronym here. But yeah, basically what this is allowing us to do is get web involved, so web can start developing our back end for apps, and we can just push the sort of front end from the back end to our device. I can speak more about how that works after. But since we've got that in place, like we've been talking so much more to like the rest of product engineering, we've been onboarding people into how we're making the app. People have been going away and making products that they want to see in the app, and they can just see it in real time.
Cool.
So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. But I'm just really interested, like, again, so I can see where we're starting to blend between the different disciplines. What about from a test engineering perspective? Are you tied quite up with the rest of the crew, or is it a bit of a silo in terms of apps?
I think apps is quite often a bit of a silo by its nature. We're trying to make it less so I can kind of echo what Harriet said, go back a few years ago, it was AutoTrader as a website, or they also have an app. And now, and for quite a while now, the iOS app is AutoTrader's biggest consumer platform and has been for a while. So we're trying to kind of unify together. When I moved into apps, there was a lot less kind of collaboration between web and apps than there is now. It's taken longer, I think, for the testing collaboration to happen. I think the developer collaboration came in a bit earlier. Just because in a general kind of day-to-day, what we do is quite different. We do, in web, they use Cypress for all their testing. It would be a dream if we could use Cypress on apps, but nothing is quite that mature on an apps testing front. It can be a lot more involved, and there aren't necessarily that many shared skills in terms of kind of the technical aspects. There's, of course, the shared skills in terms of the best practice, how to write a good test, and very top level kind of things. But when you get down to the nitty gritty, there's not all that much that's necessarily shared. They're two quite different disciplines.
And what about from a marketing perspective, Paul? How does that work between like the apps side of things and the rest of your fellow marketeers?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I was going to say actually is what's really interesting now is that the way that kind of consumers are consuming kind of apps. I think it kind of highlights the fact that there's kind of such a convenience to kind of using an app. I mean, the number of times we get consumers kind of popping in a review saying, I'm burning my eyeballs out because I'm using this at kind of 11 o'clock at night in bed and they want a dark mode, I think is a testament to now why the app is so important for the business. I think in terms of the way that we work with other parts of the business, and particularly with the marketing team, now I think it's a platform with scale, and they recognise that obviously there's marketing opportunities to talk about new features or social events that are going on within AutoTrader. So I think being able to kind of now leverage our new messaging platform that I think we're going to come on to kind of communicate some of these things, I think is quite exciting going forward.
Cool. So when we started, we talked like just intro about personalisation. It's something I know we've talked a little bit about before, but I'd just like you to like explain what is personalisation and like on the other side, what is privacy? Because we talk about it a lot and you see it in the press, but actually, like layman's terms, what actually is it? Yeah,
I mean, I think from a personalisation standpoint, I was kind of thinking of kind of a good example, or actually maybe I'll start with a bad example. I was in Uniqlo the other day in the shop, right? Fantastic products. So certainly not saying that Uniqlo are a bad example of kind of products, because I think they're fantastic. But my experience of walking in that shop is when I walk in, I've got to walk through the women's section, the kids section, probably got to go up 3 flights of stairs. And, if the men's section is right into the corner, it's probably one checkout. So I've got to walk all the way through the store to kind of pick up those products. So in terms of kind of personalization, when we talk about a mobile app, it's about surfacing kind of what you're looking for and tailoring that experience. So when you land in the app or you journey through the app, that experience is being tailored specifically for you. So you're not having to go through all of these different kind of journeys that just aren't relevant, or you're seeing in the Auto Trader case, you're seeing car makes and models and price points that are just completely irrelevant for you. So that's why it's so important. And I was just looking at some industry data. They're saying that now 70% of consumers expect personalization when they kind of land on a particular brand page, and if they see that, they're actually far better, and I think it was like 31% more inclined to kind of convert. So it just highlights what you can achieve if you do start to tailor that app experience.
Yeah. And how do we, I don't know if this is getting a bit techy, but how do we then do the personalisation? What's the key points or data points that then drive the app to be able to surface personalised content? Is that where the privacy bit starts to
kind of in? Yeah. So we've got on apps, for example, we've got home screen, right? We don't really have home screen on web. I mean, the beauty in apps is it's a piece of software that lives on your device, right? Users that use apps tend to be more signed in than they would be on web.
Right.
So we can paint a picture of how the user is interacting with Auto Trader on the app itself, and based on the way they interact in the app, we can then sort of tailor their experience to them. And a lot of what we do is using tracking, and also there's like a new product that we've been using called Braze, which we've been working heavily with Paul on the implementation of that. And like just an example of what we can do with Braze, we get snowplow data from tracking. I'm trying not to get too techy here,
that's
but
cool.
You asked the question. But yeah, so basically we take that tracking data, and then Paul does his magic, and he decides what users want what information. Then we'll like display, I don't know, a notification to them. We can display like banners in app. Home screen, for example, we've got like a carousel on home screen, which basically says, the recent cars that you've been viewing. It'll also like give you different types of cars that you might be interested in. Like it might, recognize that you like hatchbacks, or that you've been looking at Audis.
Right.
Basically, stuff that's going to keep the user interested and clicking through those
Right.
full page ads.
Yeah, and Pete, I think it's worth just stressing. So when we talk about tracking, I think that's where consumers do get nervous.
Yeah.
So when we talk about privacy, historically, for anyone who's an iPhone user, perhaps I think it was about 18 months ago, this pop-up came in. So anyone who's got an iPhone, they'll be familiar that download an app, you'll see this allow tracking or don't allow at the start of an app journey. So prior to that, a lot of brands were able to use third-party data from the likes of kind of Facebook to kind of really power up kind of their advertising on these platforms. Now, with that change, it's really empowered the consumer to make the choice as to whether they want that brand to allow tracking effectively. So, what we've seen from that is clearly a lot of people don't want to allow tracking, right? So I think it's about a third of users actually allow it, so 2/3 don't. What it's forced brands to now do is use their own data to kind of really now power up the personalization of the app. So by encouraging people to sign up in the Auto Trader app, as Harriet says, that basically allows us to see your very specific journey, and we can now use that data to tailor the app experience. If you're looking for a BMW or a VW, we can customize that home screen to make it more relevant for you.
Cool.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest kind of shifts that's happened over the last few years is the empowerment of consumers to control their personalization and their data, and that's something that is quite different on apps. Between users, they install an app, what do they give it permissions for? That's entirely up to them. What do they share with the app? That's entirely up to them. Do they want notifications or not? That's entirely up to them. And all of this is now on device. We don't have to offer an option for this. The devices are doing it themselves. So the user really gets to tailor these things. And equally, because of this, we need to be more conscious of these things. So an example I often give in terms of personalization is email inboxes. Everyone's got 10,000 emails in their inbox typically. They don't often look at them. Like, they'll get pinged through, and that's fine if loads of people will send you loads of emails, but people care way more about the notification area on their phone a lot of the time. If you send a couple of notifications and they're like, that's not relevant to me, they're turning that off on their device.
They might even uninstall your app at that point.
Yeah.
I thought about that.
And then you're not getting it. So you have to be a lot more conscious in terms of your personalization in an app space, I feel, as to making sure that you are really giving that relevant notification, because people care so much more about that space. And if you're not, yeah, they might just completely uninstall your app.
So where does the... I mean, I keep going, I don't know why, that Apple advert with that music with the guy where everyone's sat like in his bathroom.
Around by all the brands.
It's flying through me. It's flying through my head. So like when it comes to that personalisation strategy and like you said on notifications over email and how we do it, is that something that you come up with, Paul? Where does that personalisation strategy come from?
I think ultimately as a business, we're driven by data, right? And clearly what we've seen is if we tailor that experience, whether it be messaging to Sam's point or the user experience of somebody landing on the homepage, we actually see them generate far more ads and leads and convert better if we're tailoring that experience. Yeah. So why would we not do more of that?
But the bit I don't get is, I think you mentioned something, Harriet, is when a consumer does, a real person like me does A, how do you decide that based on that trigger you're going to do 1, 2 and 3? Is that like those like rule sets? Because there must be, or is that AI starting to think about that? How do we do that?
So a lot of the data that we gather, like it's all in-app data, right? This isn't like outside the app. It's not like while you're browsing the web or anything like that. So we'll be tracking that data. Then we send that data up to Snowplow, and then Paul can create buckets of people he wants to target with certain like notifications or certain pop-ups. So I don't know if you want to talk about that.
So we won't go into too much detail about Braze, but basically it's a new consumer engagement platform. First time we've ever had one in the app, so it's really exciting, and we're still learning. But effectively, to Harriet's point, we get all of this data. We have to decide how to segment the audience, basically based on certain behavior or things that they're doing or not doing, and then we can basically flow them through a journey. And again, if you happen to step through something, we can serve you a certain tailored message based on that. Or if you happen to abandon, we can tailor a different message for you as well. So we can now really build out these kind of individual journeys for each and every kind of customer. And clearly that's just a much better experience if you're being targeted based on what you're doing, rather than just thrown into this generic bucket of you might have done this or you might not have done that.
Yeah. In terms of the platform, you can almost imagine it like creating a flowchart. Like the user starts on the flowchart, and we've got all these little gates. Like, did they do this? Did they do that? And we can send them off in different directions depending on what kind of things they've done.
So how do you, like, from a test engineer perspective, then how do you? Because that sounds pretty complicated. How do you test that it's doing the right thing so that it doesn't come out? I'm looking at BMWs and I'm getting targeted with Ford Fiestas. Nothing wrong with Ford Fiestas, but you know what I mean. Like,
it's kind of twofold. So I mean, realistically speaking, we can't necessarily easily test it in the way that I'll just sit on the app and I'll browse 50 Ford Fiestas and see if it comes up. So the actual Braze platform has quite a nice function where we can essentially just send a test notification from a bucket. We can just send it straight to a specific device and make sure that displays. And then because it's powered by our snowplow tracking in the back end, making sure that all of our snowplow tracking is accurate and is working and is sending the expected data, we can then assume that, well, this is going to send the right notification to the right person. Yeah. And of course, when we very first set them up, we will do that very arduous process of, let's actually get a real one to trigger to make sure it works. But it's as long as all the data feeding into the system is right and the setup in the system is right, then it will work as you expected at the end of the day.
And when did we start going down this path of personalisation? Was it with the introduction of Braze, or was it before that and Braze has helped it?
I mean, I think from a user experience perspective, and these guys will pay testament to, I think we've been doing it in the app for some time. So certainly when you first land in the home screen, we've tried to tailor some of the tiles or placements within that home screen based on the sort of cars and makes and models and price points and saved searches and saved ads that you kind of looked at. So we've been doing it in the app itself for quite some time. From a engagement and messaging standpoint, that's relatively new for the app. We've been doing it on email very successfully for quite some time, but now we've got this brand new platform that starts to allow us to kind of serve up push notifications and emails kind of in the same time, or again, based on your preference. If you prefer a push or an email, we can see that and we can start to serve you the sort of communication that you prefer. It's
been complexity, I think, is the big move that we've had recently. So the things that the app does has been in there for years. It's just hard coded into the client on the home screen. You search for a BMW 3 Series, then the next time you open the app, the home screen might have a row of BMW 3 Series on it. It's personalization, but quite simple personalization. They're just simply the app locally not even on your account level, is just looking at what you do and giving you some recommendations based on that. Braze is a massive step in the direction of kind of linking the data systems together. So now it's not just this local client on this phone says, oh, you search this, so I'll show you this. It's now tying together that user and the actions that they're doing within the AutoTrader domain and all of the different feedback methods. You know, Braze can power emails as well. It's not just notifications, and kind of tying the whole thing up in kind of a more intelligent way where we can understand the user more than just having quite a simplistic, they've looked at this on this device, so we can show them that. It's a big step forwards for us in that respect.
We've definitely had like personalisation on apps for a while, like since before I even joined, because we've had John working on it for ages. But like I say, this is definitely like the new and improved personalisation. Like we've had home screen for a few years. We've had they've gone now, but they'll probably be coming back at some point, and like saved stock alerts as well. So when you make like saved searches based on different cars, you'd be getting like notifications as soon as like a new vehicle was added that, you know, conforms to that search that you'd been like interested in. Like it's something we've been doing in apps for a while. But yeah, I think with this new sort of Braze integration, we can definitely do a lot more than we used to do. And what's good as well is like this work that we've done to sort of integrate Braze into the app. We've consolidated our sort of privacy, like marketing alert screen with web. So before, everything used to live in different parts of like the sort of AT domain. Whereas now, any toggle that you toggle on the app manage alert screen will update on web and vice versa.
Oh, cool.
So you can set your email alerts on you can set your email alerts on web and app. On an app, you can just set your sort of like notification alerts and stuff. But that's all tied into one place, which is really powerful because when it comes to Braze, you have sort of notification channels. So you want users to turn on and off channels based on what they want to see. Whereas before, you could just turn the full channel off, the full channel on. Now people can decide what type of notifications they want to receive, whereas before you couldn't go into like that much detail.
Right. It does sound like, and maybe this is my ignorance, I was going to say naivety, but not ignorance, is that personalisation and apps are absolutely tied, and it's pivotal for the future of apps.
Yeah, I mean, I think example always give, right, I can't remember how many million people have downloaded Amazon, right? But they are brilliant at getting you to sign up when you first download that app. For anyone who, many of us do use the Amazon app, you know, every time you go on that home screen, you will see products that are tailored to what you've just searched for. In my case, it tends to be quite a bit of cycling stuff. So, you know, therefore, I'm much more inclined to kind of convert. If you want to just understand how powerful personalization is, log yourself out and then go back into the home screen and you will see a radically different experience in that Amazon app. So it just makes such a difference. And you can see why brands, you know, Amazon, I'm seeing McDonald's now, you know, again, they're kind of tailoring what you order. So they're pushing their app a lot as well. So it really is very powerful for businesses.
Yeah, and definitely like with the sort of change that we've made, making the app more back-end for front-end focus, it means that we can change a lot of what we display to the user on the fly. So we can do a lot of A/B testing as well. So I don't know if you've used Spotify a lot, but sometimes Spotify's UI completely changes from one day to the next, and you've not updated the app at all. So they create their app, or they used to anyway. I don't know if they do now. Just saying that in case. But similar to like the way we're doing it, where we create sort of different modular features, different modular UI components that we can sort of drag and drop and create a user experience based on that. And because we can do that, we can set up A/B tests. So A/B tests, in case people don't know, you know, you're showing product A, product B. We can decide what the user prefers based on that. Show it to like different people. So we could, like, I don't know, say we want a new feature on home screen that's tailored to you. We could drop that in for certain users, see how 10% of our user base reacts, and then if we like it, we can put it up to 100 and roll it out to everyone. So it's really good for that, you know, sort of experimentation and seeing what products we might want as well.
So what, previously, would we have to get a new
you'd have to release the app.
The app stores
and bug fixes as well.
That's something that I think is often worth mentioning, and kind of the differences between app and web. So app is great for personalization, like as Paul was saying. One of the big differences with apps is so many more people are signed in on an app versus on web. I think, you know, for our stats, we've got less than 10% of people on web signed into our website, whereas on our iOS app we have about 70% of the users signed in, because people are much more willing to sign in. And then you can personalize much more when you have their account, you have their information, their auto-trader browsing, you know, what they've done. That's when personalization really comes in. And then, as Harriet's mentioned, with kind of the back end for front end, we can really drive these little changes into the app and test these little things, put little banners on the homepage for this, that. We had one, I believe, for Instant Offer in the past.
Yeah, and Black Friday deals as well.
Yeah, where we could just deliver these. But the biggest thing for our server-driven UI and our back-end for front-end stuff is getting us to more of a web standard. Because as you were saying there, the difference between web and apps a lot of the time is if you want to deploy something on your website, we press a button on Go, or it's on continuous delivery already. It just goes straight out. 2 minutes later, everyone's seeing it. Typically on the app, we produce a software artifact that we're ready to release, and then we send it to Google or Apple, and they will review it and decide if they're happy with it.
Hope for the best.
Yeah, hope for the best. And then when they
is it really fingers crossed?
Oh yeah, sometimes they get rejected and you resubmit it and it's fine. Like, I don't know. Sometimes it gets rejected for a reason that it's never been rejected for in the past as well. Like, I mean, Google aren't as stringent.
Right.
No, or sometimes the tester on their end hasn't read the notes we've written them, and we have to reiterate them because they've missed something.
We're getting into tester wars.
That can delay things for days in terms of getting it out. And then when we finally do get it out, we normally do a staged release of 10%, 20%, 30%, or that kind of thing. So it takes about a week realistically for us to get the app to 100% of users, and then after that, we also need to wait for them to update the app on their device to get the new features.
So is this where the back end to front end?
Yeah, you just remove that whole thing.
Yeah. So as long as the user is on a version of our app that is up to date enough to support the latest version of what we, our back end for front end, what we've called our composable framework, we can change things on the app on the fly. In the past, simple changes like, we need to change this sentence on this page would take 2 weeks for us to change that sentence.
So this been like a revelation for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think these guys are always modest. We've got an incredible kind of 4.8 star kind of rating across the app. So it just shows the diligence that kind of goes into building an app. And obviously we do know that has a really powerful influence on kind of consumers deciding which apps to kind of download. So I think it's important that we maintain that. But yeah, sometimes there are frustrations perhaps on my side that things do get a little bit delayed and perhaps not released as quickly as I'd like. But, I think that's just part and parcel of the process. And I think another thing, interestingly to add, is that Apple are starting to pick up a little bit more on the privacy side. So I know that we've had actually quite a few rejections around not being able to kind of locate account deletion, even though we kind of share the notes and we've put it as kind of visible as we can. Apps now have to include the ability for consumers to delete that account. Right. So, there's constant kind of changing of kind of the way that we do things, and we have to kind of account for those.
So is there I've got two questions bubbling in my head. So first is there a big difference between the way Apple, when talking privacy, versus Android? Are they is it different schools of thought, or they're at a just different point in the journey? Yeah,
so I'll maybe talk about. So when Apple introduced this new, we won't call it the technical term, but basically it was this allow tracking pop-up, which was about 18 months ago. They very much positioned it as a consumer-friendly feature, and absolutely is very consumer friendly.
And that was that advert, wasn't it?
Correct. That was the advert that then they put. So again, it was kind of, they were very much on the side of the consumer, and kind of brands that are hunting you around are kind of the enemy. Reading between the lines, I would say it was a bit of a meta kind of killer. Facebook generates an awful amount of kind of ad revenue. This fundamentally kind of removed some of their capability, and I think it was about $20 billion was wiped off their market value. So, and no surprise, Apple is kind of got their ad platform, and they've seen that kind of tremendously grow as a result of that. So Android haven't gone the same route as yet, but next year they will go a similar route. But I think from a consumer perspective, again, it will empower you to choose whether you want to allow ad tracking, but from a business perspective, it won't be quite as aggressive.
So does that create a challenge, the fact that we've got two different privacy strategies?
Two different privacy strategies, and Google's typical handling is a bit more hands-off. They will give the user a lot of empowerment on their device to control things, but in terms of what we do with our actual app, they're not that bothered. Whereas Apple will mandate by X date we have added this feature into our app, or they will not allow us to do a release. And there's several things that they've mandated in privacy terms. So unlinking socials from your AutoTrader account. So if you've signed in with Google and you want to unlink Google from your AutoTrader account, there's a button to do that in the iOS app. Same as how there's the button to delete your AutoTrader account in there. Both of those are in there because Apple said all apps on our App Store need to have this functionality by this date, or you cannot release an update to your app. Whereas Google have never done anything like that.
Google Store's a bit of a free-for-all, but it's been changing, you know. Let's give them some credit. I think they're trying to like get to the standard of like Apple.
So I'm gonna go random. So I'm an Apple user. I love Apple. What about yourself? Are you Apple or Android?
Oh god.
And it's I know. I am an Android user. I think Apple devices have their place. For me personally, I don't
know what kind of worms you've opened here, Pete.
I don't know.
I like customization a bit too much personally. Okay. You know, I really like to customize the experience on my device in a way that you can't really do on an iPhone.
Maybe that's why.
That's the most polite way I've heard you ever say that, Sam.
Okay, thanks, Sam. What about yourself, Harriet?
I'm an Android user, but I do update my phone quite a lot. But at the moment, I seem to be Samsung. And I don't know why. I had an iPhone, and this is the stupidest reason to not have an iPhone, but like I'm notoriously bad at losing things. I had an iPhone for 2 weeks, went on holiday to a festival in Croatia, decided to change from my iPhone to like a really, really bad phone so I could like not lose it at the festival. Literally left the phone in an airport. So I took that as an omen of I shouldn't have an iPhone, and I've not had one since.
Wow.
So
And what about yourself, Paul?
I'm on my phone. I think the convenience. I'm not a developer. I can understand the personalisation, customization of the phone, but the convenience is spot on from an iPhone.
I feel like you get quite locked in though to Apple products. As soon as you get an iPhone, then you want a MacBook, you want the watch, and then it just takes over your life.
Yeah, I've got three kids and a partner. We've all got iPhones. Yeah. I mean, I think you're explaining. I just like the simplicity. So I've got another favourite question before we go on to like more strategy stuff. So you talked about apps, and Harriet, you mentioned Spotify. So what have when you think about personalisation, have you got favourite apps that like you absolutely love the way that they've done it?
Yeah, I think from my side, I mean, Strava is probably one I've had for a few years. It's I'm getting on, and it's not quite as easy to go for so many runs or bike rides, but I just love the fact that you can, when you upload a ride or a run, you can see what other people are doing in your area. You can look back over kind of your historical times, and you're not having to kind of search for these things. They're kind of all surfaced immediately when you kind of download the app, and there's kind of segments and things like that. I mean, it's a bit painful to see that you're getting older and slower, but I just love the fact that you can kind of see all of that data as soon as you kind of open
it. I do like the fact you can do the privacy zones though as
well.
Especially if you've got a nice bike, you don't want to advertise in where you live.
Exactly.
For, pesky people.
Yeah.
What about yourself, Harriet?
I'm just going to go with my Spotify option from before. I use that app way too much probably, but I really like how you get it so tailored to you. Like you get 6 daily mixes, for example. It works out what sort of genres you like. I've got playlists that me and my friends have sort of created together, and then it's like recommended songs to add to it. Yeah. I think from a personalisation perspective and from like just a general user perspective, it's a really good app.
Yeah. See, what I've just realised this weekend, I went away with my eldest son. On the way back, we were listening to Spotify, and I put that new DJ feature on.
God,
and it said, "Hi, Gab," and I'm like, "I'm not Gab." So I realised, because my playmix was getting weirder and weirder, that my 13-year-old son has somehow hijacked my account, changed the name. So when his DJ mix came up, it'd have one of mine, like the Beatles or whatever, and then it had some random stuff. But it was the bit where you can see that he's using it more than me. So like every third or fourth song was something I liked, and then I was like, what is this?
Yeah, that's a really like random feature I'd say they've added recently. I'm not the biggest fan of that one, because I think it just switches from like 6 songs of like one sort of genre, and then it'll go straight into 6 of something completely different. And then obviously it's like an AI generated voice, so it doesn't pronounce all the words properly either. So I think it's just a bit jarring. Like you might as well just listen to the radio at that point.
And what about yourself, Sam?
Personalisation wise, I've got to go for Spotify as well. Wow. I mean, I made my Spotify account not long after they launched in the UK, back when I was in year 8 at secondary school when I made my Spotify account. I know, right?
Oh, God. Feel really old.
And I've used it basically the entire time for listening to music, and since I've used it for so long, the recommendations it gives me are fantastic. I would say now, having used it for so long, maybe more than half of kind of my go-to put on shuffle playlist comes from Spotify radios and blends and recommendations, and it has really introduced me to so much music that I never would have seen in other ways.
Yeah.
Even if their A/B testing strategy can be a little bit annoying, and it's really quite annoying when you're using the app one day, then the next day the function you just really like that you saw is gone, or this button's completely moved, and then another week it moves back somewhere else again. So from a UX perspective, I know that could be a bit annoying, but recommendations for music, I can't fault them.
And we're about to start doing that.
We're going to hopefully do it a bit less like that, but yeah.
Cool. So flipping back to Autotrader land then. So obviously marketer, apps engineer, test engineer. What is the most rewarding part of your role when you think about the whole personalisation piece? Is the things that really go, oh, that's brilliant, I love it?
Yeah, I think for me, it's just sharing the successes that we had. So, and just getting those learnings and then taking them forward into kind of the next piece of work that we do. So, for example, on the Braze consumer engagement platform, we've started to roll out some of the push notifications, and already it's early days, but already what we're interestingly seeing is, for those that don't know, we give away a free electric car every month. So we thought, let's roll a push notification out to all of our app users, and it will do amazingly well. And we're giving away a free car, right? All you got to do is provide your email address. So for anyone listening, do go ahead, because we run that every month. It's so I think we've given away 27 so far.
Wow.
But what was really interesting is went out to a mass of people, and it got a lot of traffic. Tens of thousands of kind of clicks. But what we then have in parallel is we have things around where you're selling your car, and we have push notifications that kind of talk to you around if you've decided to kind of edit your ad. To me, they're a bit more mundane, a bit more straightforward, but when you actually look at the amount of people that are clicking on those messages versus that big broadcast marketing one to give away a free car, we're actually seeing twice as many, 2 to 3 times as many people actually click through on the fact that we sent you a notification to edit your ad, because they just want confirmation that their update is now gone in place, and actually they're obviously a bit more likely to kind of sell their car. So I think those learnings are going to now help us kind of just steer us in terms of the journeys that we can take going forward, and how people like to kind of receive relevant communication. So I think for me it's about learning the successes and promoting those and taking those forward.
Cool. What about yourself, Harriet?
I'm just happy that the business is recognizing how powerful the apps can be and what we can do for our user base, and people are listening, and we're being allowed to experiment, sort of come up with our own features as well. And I think the personalization space is massive. There's so much we could do within apps. Just talking about the Braze notifications, if we know a user's been, I don't know, searching for a specific car over a few weeks and they've stopped, or maybe they've continued doing it, we can work out who's actually still in the market for a car and send them the ads that they might be interested in seeing, stuff like that. I think it's so powerful. We could be putting up banners when a new car gets released, knowing that those users would be interested in that car. There's so much we can do, so I'm just excited to see what we do with it. How cringe an answer.
So not. What about yourself, Sam? I can imagine Sam's now going to give me a curveball.
Not necessarily. I kind of, on a personal level, I'm very passionate about user experience. Something that it's kind of what drove me arguably into the testing area instead of the developer area, to be honest. It's a bit almost a hobby to a degree. I'm very passionate about user experience. I like to talk about it and understand it and do a lot. And with the Autotrader app, it's still very early days, but I can see the potential for massively improving our consumer experience through this. It's very deleterious to a user experience if you keep showing them recommendations that aren't fitting to them. It annoys people. And the more we can tailor this to the user, the more our recommendations are smart and informed by the user's decisions, the more relevant things we show them, the more relevant notifications we send them, the better the user experience for everyone in our app is going to get. And as someone that's really passionate about user experience in general, I'm very optimistic and very hopeful to see where in the long run this is going to take us, and what we can do to really make our users, lock the phone, put it in the pocket and go, that was a really good experience on the app. That was good. It did what I wanted it to do. It recommended some cool things. I've never had anyone yet give us a review and go, the app recommended the car I bought, but one day that might happen, and that will be fantastic.
Cool. Yeah, and I think just crucially, we know that electric cars are the big, buzz for the next few years. So I think crucially being able to determine exactly when perhaps consumers are starting to think about electric cars and serving them kind of some educational kind of content, charging, what kind of charging point do you want to get installed? I think that for me is quite exciting and a big opportunity to just make sure that the content is relevantly kind of sent at the right time for you, but also relevant based on where you are in kind of your car buying journey.
Yeah. There's so much. No, go on. There's so much you can do as well in terms of accounts, and I think that's an area we've not really harnessed as much in terms of like app accounts as well. Like we don't really do that much social aspect of accounts. Like we don't really have sort of friends on AutoTrader or anything like that. I think a big thing that we've looked into in the past in like some of our hack days and stuff is like having shared lists, for example. That would be a big sort of personalisation feature, I guess, if you could like share a list with someone else and people could be adding to and from like your saved search list, things like that.
Yeah, there's a bunch of features that we've talked about like that. We know so many people when they browse for a car, they have that one person that's their car friend that knows about cars, and they ping all of these adverts, they share them all to them. What if you could have a shared list with that person?
Yeah, and then we could recommend what cars you could add to that list, kind of like playlist.
That is super interesting, because me and one of the lads who works here, DCJ, we both got VW vans. When he was buying his, he was pinging me, what do you think of this one? What do you think? And I'm like, I'm not a guru in them. I've just got one, which probably isn't the best one. But it is especially if you're into like more specialist vehicles and you're trying to reach out to people who really know their stuff. Like, don't get the 2 litre, get the 1.6 because it's X, Y, Z on. Yeah, and
electric cars, right? I mean, that's a great example. I think we're all learning about them. So. I was fortunate enough, went to EV Live at the weekend. It's the first time I got to drive a Tesla, and I suddenly got what all the buzz was about. I'd read about it and obviously seen them on the site, but actually driving one and sitting in there, and there's kind of cameras all around you and not having any dials. I was like, okay, I kind of get why these are now pretty popular.
Buying a car for a lot of people is a collaborative experience, and we don't have any collaborative features yet. But that whole scope is open to us, and in the long run, there's so many things we could do in that space.
Cool. And is that, I was going to ask one last question around like trends, whether the industry trends or technical trends, but is it that push to EV where you think that is going to, or is there other trends? I
mean, I think obviously in the car industry, I think that's obviously one of the big priorities for AutoTrader over the next few years as we build up to kind of this 2030 kind of deadline. I think from an app perspective, consumer engagement is now, a massive kind of area of kind of focus. I think because we've lost that ability to kind of serve ads successfully, perhaps through kind of Facebook and other meta platforms where there's huge scale, the onus is really on us now to kind of leverage our own data to kind of successfully tailor those ads for each individual user. So I think ensuring that users are kind of signed in and how we manage that data, I think is probably the big area of focus for the industry.
Cool.
Yeah. I'd say like app-wise, it's just a fight to stay relevant, right? Like we don't want an out-of-date looking app. We want to make sure it's looking nice. We don't want people, to stop using the app because it looks like out of date, things like that.
Stuck in the 90s.
Yeah, exactly. No, but I've seen apps out there that you use them and they just, even if they were like launched 2 years ago, they're already like looking a bit old. I get what you mean, yeah. Like we need to make sure that like we're at the front of that because people just stop using it, especially like younger people as well, because it is the internet at the end of the day, right?
Yeah. And what about yourself, Sam? Any trends that you're particularly looking at, excited about,
well,
fearful of?
At the moment, there's a massive trend, not even just in apps, but in tech in general, and AI and machine learning and all the rest. It's kind of become the in thing, and you've got to put AI in front of all your features. I mean, in terms of AutoTrader, we've used a lot of machine learning, artificial intelligence in various places, not necessarily, someone might know, but the mileage indicator is powered by machine learning in the background, for example. These kind of things that all calculate, not really necessarily sung about, and a lot of apps are now starting to sing about our AI powered recommendations and all the rest, and it's an interesting area. There's definitely scope in the long run for us to have smarter recommendations powered by these kind of systems, and it would be really interesting to see where that could go.
Yeah, like free text search, ChatGPT, who knows?
Well, we're gonna have I think we definitely have a podcast on that type of subject. So listen, this time has absolutely flown, and you're starting to blow my mind a little bit. So cheers for that. Thanks for coming and sitting on the couch for the last 40 plus minutes. And thanks for people tuning in. Keep an eye out for future episodes where we'll be going back to the land of Auto Trader with product and tech folk and talking about stuff they're passionate about. Thanks a lot.
Thank
Thank you.